There have been a lot of stories about people who rejected the COVID vaccine, find themselves on their deathbeds, and then say something just very on the nose like, egad, if only I had the vaccine. And I look at these stories and I'm like, for real, man? Like, I'm sorry, that's a little too on the nose. I kind of don't feel like people are being intubated or sitting there going, please, the vaccine. But that's the story they keep giving us. There was that one woman in Alabama and she's like, I have had people and they say, can I have the vaccine? And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's too late. And there was a story about the guy who was like, I should have got the damn vaccine. And then he dies. But to be fair, there was one viral story where it was a guy who recovered from COVID from the hospital. And he's like, I'm still not getting it. Look, whether you want to get it is entirely up to you and your doctor and what makes sense for you. I'm only bringing it up because the stories are too on the nose. I'm not saying they're not true. I have no evidence to suggest they aren't. And to be honest, with the amount of people who have died from COVID, I'm sure there are many people who have expressed something like that. But these are the kind of stories that are just so insanely specific, people actually question the media. Now, to be fair, people are questioning the media for a lot of other reasons, too, notably that the media has been lying a whole lot for a real long time. And people don't know what to believe anymore, or at the very least, they feel they should not believe the mainstream media. Which brings us to Florida. It brings us to Fauci, and it brings us to Joe Biden. Several big things are happening. Ron DeSantis, of course, has kept Florida open. He's saying no to vaccine mandates, no to mask mandates, and many other jurisdictions are starting to implement these restrictions. We're seeing mask mandates across the board. New York has implemented mandatory vaccination for public accommodation. Not everywhere, but as far as I'm concerned, you mandate it for one essential function of someone's life, and you've mandated the vaccine. Now, that's led to a lot of uproar, but mostly from people on the right, I suppose. Now, interestingly, my understanding is that less than half of the country is actually vaccinated, and I don't know how this is going to play out. I will say for New York, when we had the debate with Charlie and Vaush brought up a really great point. Whether you like the guy or not, he said something very interesting that I did not consider. Most people, or at least a large amount of people who got the vaccine, didn't keep their vaccine cards. They were told they weren't going to need them, so they lost them. People are complaining they don't fit in wallets. What are you supposed to do with it? So they just got rid of it. So how will you even implement this anyway? Make people go get more vaccines, I guess? Well, apparently now there's reporting that if you got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is not an mRNA vaccine, that they will allow you to get a supplemental vaccine. And I'm just kind of like, you know what, man? Look, I think you make the decision with you and your doctor, because the media is trying to scare you half the time to get ad revenue, and they don't know you. They don't know your history. We had Pete Parada from The Offspring. He's kicked out of the band, I guess, because he has Guillain-Barré syndrome. Again, pronouncing it wrong probably, but Guillain-Barré syndrome, and so he can't get it. That's why I think it's important you talk to your doctor. But here we go. I want to talk about Ron DeSantis first and foremost, but I want to highlight it just with this first. Fauci says he fears a COVID variant worse than Delta could be coming. Heavens. Could it be that all the talk about a lockdown coming to the U.S. is true and correct? Perhaps. I'll tell you what I think. I don't think we're going to get the lockdown the same way. I think we're going to see what they call a lockdown, and then they're going to say, if you're vaccinated, you'll have an exemption. Or you will be the exception with an exemption to the lockdown. So they'll call it a lockdown so that they can say they're applying it equally, and then say, but now thanks to this new science, people who are vaccinated we're going to allow to go and do certain things. So the lockdown won't be imposed on only the unvaccinated. It'll be on everybody, and that'll be their workaround of saying we're not discriminating. But that means people like Pete Parada, well, you are going to be a second-class citizen because you are medically unable to get that vaccine. That's why I don't like this idea. Of course, I know. The government has said there will be exceptions and things of that nature. But that makes no sense. I'm sorry. If you're saying, like, in a workplace, I understand this, medical exemptions. The problem is, if you're like, we must lock down the country and implement these strict vaccination mandates for the sake of all mankind to prevent the spread, any exception breaks that, even for somebody who's deserving of one, like Pete Parada, if I'm pronouncing his name right. Well, here we go, baby. DeSantis strikes back. Joe Biden. The Biden admin, the media, basically all the Democrats are screaming Florida at the top of their lungs. If you look at the charts of hospitalizations, you can see that the amount of hospitalizations right now being tracked in Florida are comparable to the peak of COVID, I believe it was last year. So it sounds like there are some issues in Florida. Now, as I mentioned, or I don't know if I mentioned it here, but with a lot of older people in Florida, they're more conservative. They're less trusting of government authority. They probably want more individual liberties. Then you have a lot of people who are Cuban exiles and probably Venezuelan exiles who also don't want to see government authority. So they're going to oppose the restrictions and the lockdowns. And that being said, the older folks are more susceptible to COVID, so you probably will see more hospitalizations. Well, the Biden admin's coming after DeSantis, so his response, he says, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID until the border is secure. That's fascinating. You know why? Well, it's fascinating because the U.S. may offer COVID vaccine to migrants crossing from Mexico. This is the big story. That if you are an illegal immigrant and you cross the border, they'll say, would you like to get the vaccine? And you can say, no, thank you. And they'll say, okay, sir, have a nice day. Carry on. Well, how would you like a free plane ride to Tennessee? Because apparently that's something they're doing. Now check it out from the Daily Mail. Biden plans mandate for all foreign visitors to enter America as part of border reopening program. You got to be kidding me. I'm sorry, my friends. At this point, I think it is a fair analysis to say that Joe Biden is doing everything in his power to bring illegal immigrants into this country. Of course, he's not trying to stop it. I think any statement from Democrats or Biden about them trying to stop the flow of illegal immigration is just a stupid slap in the face, and you'd have to be really dumb to believe it. Because now they're saying, okay, well, we'll let you in anyway, even if you're not vaccinated. And that's what DeSantis is basically saying. He said Biden was importing the virus. Well, Biden's like, if you're German and you want to fly to America for a vacation, you got to have the vaccine. But if you're an illegal immigrant coming through the southern border, whatever. This is crazy demoralizing. I'll tell you that. I have friends, Eastern European friends. I have friends from all over, actually. And, I've talked to several of them about coming to the U.S., and it's very difficult. Some countries require visas, like Brazil, for instance. You need a visa to come to the United States, and you need a Brazilian visa to go to Brazil. You have to actually apply and get it. It takes some time. Not that long, though. And then there are people in Europe I know who really want to come here, and they're like, why is it so difficult to get visas? Eastern Europe, it's particularly difficult. A lot of people point out, though, they're like, that's why people fly to, like, Mexico and then just cross the border, because Biden's like, doors open, come on in. You're coming through an airport. Nah, that's not the people he wants. Isn't it funny that they go nuts about Donald Trump and the Ishhole countries statement? He's like, we want more people from Norway. We don't want people from Haiti or whatever. Now, I don't know that he actually said that because it's just the word of some Democrat claiming Trump said it. Maybe he did. I wouldn't be surprised. The funny thing about it is it's inverted under Biden. Not to actually say countries are ishholes. I think some countries are destabilized, and I try not to be disparaging to other countries. I think we want to help them and not just insult. But it's interesting that there are countries that are less developed, and that's where Biden is mostly interested in bringing people in from. And then the more developed countries, not so much. See, the issue is, in the United States, we are a large producer of pollution. Not the largest, in fact, but we do produce a lot. And bringing people here means that we'll increase the rate of pollution in this country. I bring that up just to say for all of the leftists who are like, climate change, it must be stopped. I'm like, then stop bringing people to America because we produce a lot of trash. And you're going to bring people from countries that don't and bring them here, and then they will. It's going to create demand for certain products. Well, to be fair, I guess with the economic collapse underway, I'm being somewhat facetious, we have less pollution to worry about. I tell you, man. With the restrictions on the economy, with the mask mandates on children, with the debt ceiling crisis, with the eviction moratorium, the illegality of it, with Biden bringing in 1.2 million illegal immigrants to the southern border, not even checking to see if they're vaccinated, it really feels kind of like a controlled collapse, in a sense. It's probably the best way to describe it. Let's read this story from timcast.com. If you haven't already, become a member at timcast.com to support our fierce and independent journalism and journalists. The mainstream media is mad about the work we are doing. We are also launching a nonprofit fact-checking outlet. I mentioned this some time ago. I tweeted about it, what our plans are, how we're going to rate organizations, and we're going to fact-check our own articles, and we're going to rate our own website. Well, to put it fairly, actually, the nonprofit will be entirely separate from timcast.com and independent. And we're going to have a team of fact checkers that are going to use standard journalistic ethics, probably SPJ, and maybe Reuters. And then we're going to randomly sample articles from the past few months from various websites and then check for ethics violations and then give them markings X out of 100. I think you'd actually end up seeing like the New York Times with like a 70 out of 100. You'd see like the Washington Post with like a 65 out of 100. And you'd see a lot of conservative sites with like a really low ranking, 35 out of 100. But to be fair, the Huffington Post probably would be like 1 out of 100. If the thing about like the Daily Wire is that they're an overtly opinion commentary website. The thing about the Huffington Post, they claim to be real news for the most part, but it is opinion commentary. So we're gonna track this, and then we're gonna create a ranking of the top websites and show like what we found in the randomly sampled articles. We're gonna link to the randomly sampled articles so you can see for yourself exactly what we're talking about, and we're gonna be doing fact checking. So anyway, I digress. DeSantis tells Biden, "I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you until the border is secure." The Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, blasted President Joe Biden on Wednesday, asserting that he doesn't want to hear about COVID until the southern border is secure. Speaking at an event in Panama City, DeSantis ripped into Biden for nearly 5 minutes. He accused the White House of trying to implement a biomedical security state. Quote, "This is a guy who ran for president saying he was going to shut down the virus. And what has he done? He's imported more virus from around the world by having a wide open southern border. I can tell you, whatever variants are around the world, they're coming across that southern border," the governor added. And so he's not shutting down the virus. He's helping to facilitate it in our country. DeSantis is right. Addressing the CDC's recommendation that all K through 12 students and faculty wear masks, DeSantis once again said that that decision about masking will be left to parents. "I can tell you in Florida, the parents are going to be the ones in charge of that decision." It's the right way to do it, in my opinion. DeSantis went on to accuse Biden of wanting to mimic the controversial new citywide vaccine passports that are being implemented in New York City by Mayor Bill de Blasio, and took a dig at them for believing people should have to show paperwork and identification to eat at a restaurant, but not to vote. He wants that. But yet, if you want to vote, he thinks it's too much of a burden to show a picture ID when you're voting. So no voter ID. But you have to show your medical papers just to be able to live an everyday life. Give me a break. The governor said that Americans have to decide between living in a free society or we can have a biomedical security state. And I can tell you, Florida, we're a free state. Quote, "If you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I'm not going to let you get away with it. If you're trying to deny kids a proper in-person education, I'm going to stand in your way. And I'm going to stand up for the kids in Florida. If you're trying to restrict people, impose mandates, if you're trying to ruin the jobs and ruin their jobs and their livelihoods and their small businesses, if you're trying to lock people down, I am standing in your way. And I am standing for the people of Florida," DeSantis concluded. "So why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you." Bravo, good sir. Florida. A lot of exiles, people in exile, a lot of refugees, a lot of migrants there. Interestingly, that it's voted Republican and is concerned about illegal immigration, isn't it? I mean, you'd think a place full of refugees, according to the Democrats at least, would be pro-refugee. Or maybe the people of Florida recognize there are real refugees and then there are economic migrants. And as we can see with most of the people coming through the southern border, particularly through Texas and the Rio Grande Valley area, these people are economic migrants. Now, with all due respect, I respect that, right? With all due respect to these people, it is a long and arduous journey. You are on the glorious quest to enter the shining city. I can understand that. I've seen enough movies about it and the quest. And you're from this, small village, and they say, in America, they have buildings so tall you can't see the sky. And people have medicine, and there's food. It's abundant and everywhere. And you're thinking, that's the place I need to be. And with respect, I love this country too. That's why I want to see it progress. I want to see reforms and changes to improve it and make it better. What's worrying to me is this is the interesting position I think you and I may find ourselves in. Perhaps you're a liberal or a conservative. Perhaps you disagree with me, but I think there are enough of you that agree with me. We want to see changes. We are not conservatives. I am not a conservative. The conservatives, as it's described, are people who look at the history and say, stop. I don't agree with that. Not at all. I look at the country and I say, change for the better. We need to do better. The problem is, it's not the I can argue with the conservative. We can have a debate and I can be like, I think we should make these changes. And they'll say something like, stop. We'll have that argument. I look to what the left is doing and they're tearing things down. Well, that's not what we want. We don't want this country to falter. We want this country to succeed, to strive. We want people to be successful. You want to save the environment? Me too. Hey, how about nuclear energy? Oh, what's that? The modern left says no. I want people to have freedom and rights. The Second Amendment. The left says no. I'm sorry. I always got to make sure I clarify. The establishment left, the Democrats, the neolibs, they say no. Leftists like guns. The problem is as I often say, these progressives, these young people align themselves with the Democrats. The Republicans can scream stop all they want, but I will take stop if people are burning the house down. You see what's happening? I look at things like police got to get reformed, man. I am not a fan. I just saw a story, I tweeted about it, where a guy was like apparently chilling at a bar or something. And the cops came in and said that he was some guy, you know, we'll say John Doe, I don't remember the name. And the guy's like, that's not me. And they were like, too bad, you're under arrest. And they arrest him. So he goes to jail and he's like, that's not my name. And they're like, yes, it is. He goes to court and he says, Your Honor, I am not this man. I am someone else. And the judge said he's clearly delusional. Lock him up. And for 2 years, he was forcefully medicated. And then they finally were like, turns out he was telling the truth. He was not the guy. But the cops arrested him. They didn't check fingerprints. They didn't check ID. They just said, we don't care. Man, these things got to change. I don't want to see a single person shot and killed by a cop who panicked and freaked out. Do you know what? I don't know how you stop something like that. So I can certainly say, let's have a conversation around reforms. Reforms have always been particularly popular among most people. I think you'd go to most conservatives and say, we respect the police for the hard job they do, but we got to have some changes. And most people usually say like, yeah, of course. Although there's that trope about conservatives just saying, stop. I think if you present to conservatives that policing has changed quite a bit since the days of officer friendly, they might say, let's go back to the days of officer friendly. And I'm like, that's not too dissimilar to what AOC said when she said we need policing to look like it does in the suburbs. Yeah, okay, well, it's very difficult in big cities. No joke. So I think we need reforms. You take a look at what the left is trying to do, though. Open borders? I mean, come on. Biden has open borders. They said they wouldn't. Here we go. This is the most fascinating thing about the whole thing, is that the Democrats were saying over and over again, no, we don't want open borders. That's a lie. The media said no one wants open borders. You tell me what this is. 1.2 million people walking across the border with no vaccine requirement. Yet if you want to be a tourist from England, you got to wait 2 weeks. You got to get a vaccine and wait 2 weeks. No joke. We try booking people from Canada and it's difficult for the IRL podcast. Yeah, you walk to the southern border. Biden's like, sure, doors wide open for those willing to break the law. That's insane to me. Well, my friends, I will tell you, I think we are headed for a lockdown. Fauci says he fears a COVID variant worse than Delta could be coming. What are they saying now? They were like Lambda is an Epsilon. It's like, oh, geez, here we go. Can we just get to the Omega variant? Here's what they're saying. This is from Axios. If America's current COVID-19 surge continues unabated into the fall and winter, the country will likely face an even more deadly strain of the virus that could evade the current coronavirus vaccines, Fauci said. Fauci told McClatchy Wednesday. Fauci's comments underscore the importance of acting quickly to vaccinate the tens of millions of Americans who have not been inoculated against the virus. The current surge in coronavirus cases nationwide is being driven by the Delta variant. As the virus continues to spread due to the insufficient vaccination rates, it is being given ample time to mutate into a more dangerous new variant in the fall and winter. Quite frankly, we're very lucky that the vaccines that we have now do very well against the variants, particularly against severe illness, Fauci said. If another one comes along that has an equally high capability of transmitting, but also is much more severe, then we could really be in trouble. People who are not getting vaccinated mistakenly think it's only about them, but it isn't. It's about everybody else also. Now, I'll be honest. That's true. I think about a glorious future like Star Trek with replicators and traveling the stars, and that requires collective action. What do I mean by that? I'm not a big fan of collectivism in a certain sense, in the leftist sense. I am, though, in the sense of like humans working together and recognizing how to help each other and what we should or shouldn't do for the betterment of mankind. That means don't throw trash on the ground because y'all screwing with my beautiful nature. Things like that. So when I think about, vaccines and stuff like that, I'm like, I agree. Okay, I think you should go to your doctor, make sure that you're doing everything right by your health because it's more of a deontological issue. As much as I'd like the whole country to be better, I think the grassroots decentralized method is the path forward. Individuals who can't get it, we respect their rights. If somebody's in a wheelchair, I think it's great that we build wheelchair ramps. We said, okay, all new buildings should have a wheelchair ramp next to their stairs. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I love the idea. Why not? Just incorporate it into the design to accommodate people so that we can all work together and live together and maximize the potential of our neighbors. We're only as strong as the weakest link. As for mandates, though, I just don't think you can do that. I mean, I know the DOJ has said they can, and they will in a lot of ways. But for customers, I mean, if you're vaccinated, you're safe. Why are we doing this? Because people's choices. Sorry. That makes no sense. And so long as you push something that makes no sense, I'm going to tell you this, you're not going to convince people. Here's what I say. You want to know, there's a few reasons why I always say talk to your doctor. The first is, obviously, it's the right thing to do. Talk to a doctor. You know what I mean? Like, find one you trust. If you don't trust the media, find a doctor in your area, ask them questions about, medical issues. And if you don't feel comfortable with them, then you absolutely are entitled to go to somebody else. But I think you need to have that trusting person because the media is constantly flooding the zone with garbage. So you got to find that person you know and trust. And I tell you this, man, they may tell you things that are surprising. I know a lot of people. In fact, most of the people I know who got vaccinated have nothing to say about it, no adverse reactions at all. And the reason is, they didn't have an adverse reaction. They're not going to say anything. And then people only hear the squeaky wheels. You hear about VAERS and things like that. And I think those are important. The CDC itself. This is the thing you got to like, my friends, seriously, go to the CDC website. I read this stuff and they talk about allergies and they talk about VAERS. They actually note the adverse reactions from VAERS. They don't hide that stuff. It's crazy to me. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend the CDC is the great bastion of truth or anything like that. I'm just saying, talk to a doctor, make sure that they've done their research and you trust them. But I tell you this, man, the fear mongering from the media is less about, in my opinion, COVID and more, in my opinion, about exploiting a crisis in order to enact authoritarian controls. I think they would do this regardless. In fact, when COVID first came out, YouTube demonetized me for talking about it. No joke. When it was going crazy in Wuhan, they demonetized my video and said, do not talk about this. And I said, what? One, it's a news story. That's insane to me. How are you going to tell me I can't talk about news? And then when like a month or two, they're like, okay, fine, now you can talk about it. 15 days to slow the spread. Because you know what I think? I think COVID is serious. I think the Delta variant is serious. And I think Trump accomplished a vaccine. And I think you can make that decision with your medical provider about what makes sense for you. And you don't got to hear it from me. However, I do think for the most part, Fauci and all these other and many other people in government have decided this is an opportunity to freak people out and exploit a crisis for authoritarian controls. So, of course, people don't trust the media. And you know what? Why should they? I actually tend to. This is really funny, isn't it? I'm so critical of them. Yeah, because they put out too much crap. But it's not always garbage. You can sort through and check source material and see that very often media outlets are putting out good information. I would avoid websites like CNN. No joke. Like, I use CNN for sources when I can literally check the facts and like find the actual source material. I wouldn't go near CNN unless I could. The New York Times is okay, however, but CNN is complete and utter trash. CNN's basically Huffington Post. Anyway, I think we're facing a new lockdown. I think it'll likely be something like, we have to lock down, oh no. And then a week or two later, they'll say, we're going to start easing the lockdown first for those that are vaccinated. Why? Because then everyone's going to be like, so if I get vaccinated and go outside, that's right. And then they will. And that'll be their play to get everyone vaccinated. I don't like the idea that the ends justify the means. That's more utilitarian. And that violates the individual liberties of human beings. I think the individual is, as the saying goes, the smallest minority. That means we must protect the rights of individuals. And if we do, you will find the rights of everyone are then protected. But if you go the utilitarian route and say that we are going to violate the rights of one group for the betterment of another, well, then you are quite literally oppressing people. Of course, the left doesn't seem to get that, but I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.